Yo, what's up? It's Abortive, and today we are going to be reading a diphenhydramine trip report, so let's get it. Back in the day, they made this benadryl spray. Fucking stupid idea knowing what benadryl is. I was a kid with the worst sunburn ever, and I didn't understand that I could overdose on stuff. I had never done drugs before and probably didn't even understand what drugs were yet. The sunburn was infected, and I had a fever. My whole back was ripped apart and leaking fluid, as were the backs of my legs, and I was in great pain. So I did what the bottle said to and applied to the affected area. My entire back and legs, which of course were open wounds too. I ignored that part. After I'd finished, I'd realized I'd probably gone through half of the bottle on just my back. I had more Benadryl though, so I dosed the syrup and the pill form. I then tried to sleep. At first, my clothes were very uncomfortable, so I stripped them off, but the bedsheet still feels like it's cutting into my wound on my back, so I pull them off as well. When I was a kid, of course, I was afraid of monsters, but not just any monsters. Aliens were my monsters of choice. Aliens, of course, are real and not fake like all other monsters, and they actually do abduct children and do terrible things to them, so it is a good idea to be scared of them. Taking my covers and clothes off had removed my alien shield, since they obviously will need direct access to my naked body if they were going to experiment. I knew this, but I couldn't do anything about it, since the clothes hurt so damn much to wear and the sheets were unbearable. At this point, the drug was kicking in. I did the smart thing and tried to rationalize that aliens don't exist. I don't know how this shit works, but at some point in my rationalization, I looked out my open window to see very plainly that nothing was out there and that nothing could get me. I was feeling a calm when the stereotypical gray alien suddenly opened his eyes, as if I had been looking at his face the entire time but not being able to see him until his eyes were open. I exploded from my bed and ran down the hall naked, screaming. My parents burst out of the room screaming what happened, and I screamed back, "The Greys." I should mention that I don't remember how old I was, but I remember I was certainly too old to be running down the halls screaming whenever I got scared. This wasn't fear, it was a panic reflex. After that, I went back and fell asleep, only to wake up paralyzed. I think I must have had sleep apnea or something, but I never got that shit checked. Waking up with sleep paralysis in the middle of a delirium is not fucking fun. I was convinced the aliens came back and abducted me, and I couldn't move or speak. Yes, I do have the full abduction story that I can't blame drugs 100% for. They came into my room, and I saw them at the foot of my bed. I never saw the shit because I told them, with my mind how else, after they had arrived, that the reason that humans were always scared of them was because of their inbuilt thing and their physique that made us frightened of all other humanoid species. I rationalized to the aliens that this was true. I told them to look at human-on-human conflict. I told them that I was also not trying to be rude or mean, and that they weren't just disgusting to behold, they were just scary to me. I said paralysis made it even worse. The aliens were very nice and told me that they would put me to sleep, so I would know that I was being abducted, and I could feel it, but I wouldn't be able to see them. This was my suggestion, but they understood my thoughts so well that I didn't have to ask. Then, my eyes closed, and I could feel them touching me and injecting my chest with a long needle, and it hurt so bad that I scrunched my eyes so they'd be closed even more. When I did that, the aliens stopped injecting me for a second, and I got really numb and I couldn't feel anything but their arms holding my arms down. I remained paralyzed, but to pass the time and try to break the obvious unreality of my horrible nightmare, I mentally counted the fingers on each hand grabbing me, figuring that if they had less than 4, then they couldn't be real because they couldn't fucking hold things like needles. To my surprise, they were very long, nailless, and it seemed I could always feel at least 5 digits spread out a palm on my chest, and the needle in between them. For the naysayers, yes, I remember this part vividly. I remember the hands were very firm, not soft at all, and also not bony. Working hands. Doctor hands, my mind said. I remember they never once grabbed me to hold me down, and I thought at the same time that it would be awkward to make a fist with such long fingers. They always touched me with their fingers lengthwise. If they needed to hold my arm, it was done at the elbow with several fingers extended up onto my bicep, and 2 digits holding my forearm. I woke up to a violent seizure and more sleep paralysis. The sleep paralysis continues to this day. The sleep seizures continued afterward for at least a week. Fucking every night. And they always preceded by sleep paralysis and another abduction. Each abduction happened like the last one. The aliens came around 3:00 a.m. I stayed up for them because I was scared. I could feel them coming. I'd suddenly fall asleep, then wake up. My eyes wouldn't open though, and I could feel all the stuff they were doing to me. When they were done, they would leave at about 5 a.m. I lost the hours and it felt like only minutes. The seizure would begin at the end and continue on, it seemed. Into daylight, I would actually wake up, of course being jostled by the seizure. Today, I sleep crappy and I'm still scared of aliens. I also have this peculiar bump on my chest where I thought I had been injected. It developed days after the initial quote-unquote abduction, and I remember I thought there was a needle hole sealing up on top of it. During PE in high school, I got hit by a baseball in that exact same spot, my sternum. It became mysteriously infected despite the fact that there was no cut, and since sunburn, I haven't had an infection. I pulled a piece of metal out of it, but for some reason, I imagined it must have been a Zimmer embedded into my chest after the baseball impact, and I threw it away. To sum it all up, I am not sure whether or not I was abducted by aliens. I have had problems sleeping since that day. My mind was seriously fucked for about 5 years afterwards, and I would keep getting abducted until I passed puberty, occasionally having lingering psychotic effects. And occasionally I would break the state of mind, which I describe as a flashback. My face gets red and I start to think like I am tripping again. I then exhibit all symptoms of schizophrenia I can in a short span and then return to normal within a half hour. Even with my drug knowledge now, my experience with psychedelics and a sitter, I'd have to think very long about trying that shit again. And yes, I realize how batshit insane that story sounds. Taking a cataclysmic amount of a terrible drug when I was 10 years old definitely colored my perception of that night. I emphasize the fact that even now, I only know I must have been tripping, because I fucking poured benadryl into my gullet until it seeped out of my pores, and I was abducted by aliens. If the benadryl bit didn't happen, then the aliens would have seemed completely believable. Yo, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Maybe leave me a comment for what I should do a video on next. I'll see you in the next one.